Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel from Evelyn and Peter, and today I have the Fall Fable Pullover to share with you guys. This pattern can be found free on my blog, EvelynAndPeter.com. It includes sizes extra small through 5X. It's also available as a kit with Lion Brand. The kit comes with all the yarn that you need to make your pullover, plus a free copy of the printable PDF digital download of the pattern. I will link to that in the description, and if you're not already subscribed to my newsletter, I always recommend doing that. I like to send out newsletters whenever I have a new design or tutorial coming out, or just whenever there's a really good sale with my patterns or my kits. So you can do that by just heading to my blog and then popping in your email. And then you guys will be the first to know about all my new stuff happening with Evelyn and Peter, and I like to give out coupon codes and discount codes, stuff like that. So make sure you go ahead and do that. It's also available in my Etsy shop and in my Ravelry shop. And then of course this is the free full video tutorial as well that will walk you guys through the pattern. This video is meant to go along with the written pattern, so you need to pull that up on my blog or with the printable PDF, and then you can follow along with this video. I'm making the size small in the video, so it will be different than all of the other sizes. Your stitch count and row count, everything like that will be different, so just make sure you have yours pulled up as we go along. It's very basic sweater. The panels are worked separately from the bottom up, so you'll have the ribbing along the bottom, and then we'll do the same stitch repeat throughout, same with on the sleeves. You'll be switching out your yarn color every 2 rows to make the stripes. You'll want to make sure that you don't cut your yarn as you switch it out. We're just going to pull it up along the side and create floats along the panel, which you will later sew over or crochet over to hide them. That way you have way less ends to weave in later on. When you're making this sweater, you want to make sure that the chains within the row, that you have a loose tension as you do them. I know some people have the tendency to make their chains really tight, and you don't want to do that. It'll mess with your gauge and just with the stitch. It'll pull your sweater in, so make sure you try and keep your tension loose as you go. And the chains within the pattern do go towards your stitch count. I explained that in the video and show you guys how to count your stitches. Your stitch count stays the same throughout the panel except for when you get to the decrease area of the neckline. This is also very easy to customize. I know lots of people like longer sweaters, so you can just add rows and multiples of 2 to create your sweater longer. If you want a more cropped version, you can take out rows and multiples of 2 as well. And then same with the sleeves. If you need longer or shorter sleeves, you can easily adjust the length of those as well. I will link to everything in the description for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. So for this design, you're going to need worsted weight yarn. I'm using Lion Brand's Color Theory. You're going to need 2 different colored yarns if you plan on doing stripes. I am using the ivory color and then the nutmeg color as well. All of the exact yardage for all 9 sizes is available on my blog, so you can click through to find all that information. You're also going to need a 5mm crochet hook, a needle to weave in your ends, a pair of scissors, and then a couple of stitch markers as well. All 4 panels start off the exact same way with the ribbing. I am beginning with the back panel here, so you can just make a slip knot. And now we're going to be working the ribbing rows. So to do that, you can begin by chaining 6. So just yarn over and pull through the loop on your hook a total of 6 times. And now starting in the second chain from the hook, I'm going to insert my hook into the back bump and just work a single crochet stitch. And then I'm just going to do this into each of the chains all the way back down for a total of 5 single crochet stitches for row 1 of the ribbing. And all of the sizes are exactly the same here, and all of the panels are the same as well for the ribbing portion. So go ahead and work your 5 single crochet stitches. And then when we get to the end of the row here, you can go ahead and just chain 1 and turn your work. To begin row 2, you're going to work a single crochet stitch into that very first stitch of the row under both the front and back loop. And then in the next row, you're going to insert your hook into the back loop only and work a single crochet stitch. And then you're going to do the same thing for the next 2 stitches as well, working in the back loop only, which is the loop furthest away from you. Work a single crochet into each of those. And then when you reach the last stitch of the row, you're going to work a regular single crochet, working through both the front and the back loop. And then you can chain 1, turn your work, and now we're just going to repeat row 2 for the rest of the ribbing. So a single crochet in the first, 3 single crochet in the back loop only, and then a single crochet in the last stitch. When you're working the ribbing rows, make sure you're doing it tight enough and that you're keeping a nice tight tension. And then you can just keep repeating that row until you have the correct amount of rows for your size. Okay, once your ribbing is complete, we're going to be working row 1 of the main body of the panel across the ends of the ribbing rows. So don't turn after the last row made of your ribbing. Instead, you're just going to chain 1, and then in the end of that last row that you made, you're going to insert your hook and work a single crochet stitch. And then you're just going to do this all the way across. In the end of the next row, work a single crochet, and then in the end of the 3rd row, work a single crochet, and just continue across. So you're not working into actual stitches, you're just working into the ends of the rows, so you can place your hook wherever it feels most comfortable to you, and just make sure you have 1 stitch per row made. You get to the end of your ribbing, you're going to need to change colors with the last stitch. So instead of doing your final yarn over and pull through with the color we currently have, you're going to drop that, and then you're going to bring in color B and place it on your hook and do that last pull through with your new color to switch to color B. Then you can just kind of tug the 2 tails down slightly to make sure your stitch is secure, and you can kind of just hold it down with your fingers and keep the tails out of the way. And that completes row 1, and now our working yarn is color B, which is the cream color, and we're going to be working the next 2 rows with this color. So you can go ahead and chain 2 and turn your work. Chain 2 does not count as a stitch, but we're also not going to be working our first stitch into the first stitch below. We're going to work it into the second. So yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, and then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops for 1 half double crochet. So we have our chain 2, we're skipping the very first stitch where the chain 2 is, and then in the following working a half double. Now you're going to chain 2, and then yarn over, and in that very same stitch as the half double crochet, you're going to insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop with 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, skip 2 stitches, and then in the following stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 5 stitches. And you're basically doing a half double crochet 2 together here, just worked kind of differently than normal. So chain 2, and then we're going to do that same thing, yarn over, insert your hook into the same spot as the last stitch, so in that very same stitch, and then yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you're going to yarn over and skip 2 stitches in between, insert your hook into the following, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 5. And we're just going to repeat this across the row. So chain 2, yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch as the previous, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, skip 2, insert your hook into the following, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 5. So you just continue repeating this all the way across the row. You want to make sure that your chains are not pulled too tightly. Try and keep a relaxed tension on that on the chain spaces. You do not want them tight because then your work will kind of scrunch together. So go ahead and repeat across, and I will show you how to finish off the row. Okay, so now we're coming to the end of the row. To finish up, you're going to chain 2. We're going to do the same stitch, yarn over, insert our hook into the same spot as the last stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and now we're just going to yarn over and only skip 1, and then in the final stitch, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. So that completes the row here. And now we're just going to be working our way across for the next one. You can see we're not going to change colors. We're only going to change every 2 rows with this stitch. So you can go ahead and chain 2 and turn your work. Now yarn over, and in that very first chain space, just work a half double crochet stitch. And now we're going to be doing the same thing, just working our stitches into the chain spaces instead of a stitch like we did in the previous row. So chain 2, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 5. Chain 2, and do the same thing. You're going to yarn over in that very same chain space that you just worked to stitch in. Insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the following chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 5. So you're working them into actual chain spaces, not the chain. Chain 2, and just continue repeating this across the row, working your stitch over the 2 chain spaces. You'll always start the next one in the same chain space that the previous one finished on, and just continue all the way across. Again, try and keep your chains, your tension nice and even in the chains. Do not pull it down and do it too tightly. So go ahead and continue repeating across the row, and then I will meet you at the end to show you how to finish the row and change colors. So we're at the end of the row. We have 1 chain space and 1 stitch remaining. You're going to chain 2, yarn over, insert your hook into the last chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and now insert your hook into the top of the half double crochet from the row below, yarn over, pull up a loop. And now instead of yarning over and pulling through all 5 like you normally would, you're going to drop the yarn, and we're just going to pick up color A again, place it on our hook, and do the last pull through with color A. So we're changing colors here. You want to hold the cream yarn down and then pull through with color A. And then you want to make sure that your float that you have on the side here is not tugged too tightly. You don't want your work to scrunch up. You want to have a nice loose tension with it. And then don't worry about cutting and joining yarns and leaving tails. We're just going to be leaving the floats, and when we seam our sweater together, it will be hidden on the inside of the sweater and within the seams. So I recommend just leaving your yarns attached instead of having to cut and join a million times. You totally can cut and join if you prefer it that way. I just find less work this way. Now our working yarn is color A again. You're just going to chain 2 and turn your work. And for the remainder of this panel, you're just repeating the previous row. So the row that we just did is what you're going to be repeating over and over and over again. Just making sure that you leave the yarn attached and changing colors every 2 rows. So I'll do 2 rows now with color A, and then I'll do 2 rows with color B and just switch back and forth. So again, to start off the row, you work a half double crochet into the very first chain space, and then you're going to be chaining 2. And then doing the same thing like we did in the previous row, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the following chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 5, chain 2, and just repeat across. So if you need to, you can go back and rewatch row 3 again, our previous row, just to make sure that you know what you're doing. But that is the row we're just going to be repeating throughout the back panel. Just make sure you change your colors as you go, and then I will meet you back here to show you how to do the next panel. And again, it'll be different for all of the sizes, so just make sure you have that written pattern pulled up to see how many rows you need for your size. The stitch count is also going to be staying the same throughout the back panel. If you have that written pattern pulled up, you'll see that the chains do count as stitches in your stitch count. So when you're counting, You'll just count the little V's along the top, and those chains do go towards the stitch count, which I will show you here in just a second how to count your stitches. Okay, and then just real quick, here is how your stitches add up at the end of the row. Each of the half double crochet two togethers count as one stitch. You can see the little V on top, that's one stitch. And then the chain twos in between also count as one stitch. So the easiest way to check is just look at the top of your row and count each of the V's across, and that is one stitch, and they each go towards your stitch count. So each of these little sections here have 3 stitches. It's a 3-stitch repeat. And then the chain twos at the start of the row only do not count as a stitch. Okay, so now my back panel is complete. Some of the sizes will end on one row of a color A repeat, and some will end on one row of a color B repeat, but all of the sizes should have only one row of one of the colors at the end. That way, when we place our back and front panel together, it has a nice even stripe at the top. So if you are adding length, you'll want to add it in multiples of 2 so that you'll end with a singular row of one of the colors so that it's nice and even when we do our seaming. So now you need to go back and rework this exact same thing for your front panel. You'll just be stopping at an earlier row so we can do the neckline split. So go back, rewatch if you need to, do your front panel exactly the same, but make sure you have that written pattern pulled up so you can see where you need to stop before we start the neckline. So here I am with the first neckline row. This will be right under the splitting and shaping of the neckline section of the front panel. I have worked my way across exactly the same as any of the other rows for the current row that I'm on. It'll be different for each size, what row number you are. For the size small, it's row 22. So I'm on row 22 here. I've worked my way across just as I normally would, but I'm just going to stop when I'm a little less than halfway across. So I have a total of 40 stitches complete here. Don't forget the top of the stitch plus the chain twos each count as a stitch. And we're just going to be ending with our final stitch in the chain space. Ending with the regular repeat. We're not going to end with a normal half double crochet, just our regular repeat that we've done. So I'm going to show you that really quick. I'm going to pull out this last stitch and show you. Just do your regular repeat like normal, yarn over, pull through all 5, and that completes the row. And I have a total of 40 stitches, so just check your stitch count, and then you can go ahead and turn your work to begin the next row of the neckline shaping. So for the following row, you're just doing a regular row 3 repeat. So you're going to chain 2, and then in the first chain space, work your half double crochet, and then you're going to chain 2, and then work your regular stitch repeat across the row. So we're doing the same thing here. We haven't yet started to decrease or do our shaping on the ends of the rows, just a regular repeat across. When we get to the end of the row, we're going to change our colors. We want to keep the stripes going, so we're going to be doing our regular color change, but work your stitches across like normal. So just switch your colors out. You're going to work color A all the way back down, work your regular stitch repeat until you get to the end of the row here. So I'm coming up to the last stitch of the row. We've worked our repeat across. And instead of chaining 2 and working a regular stitch repeat, you're not going to chain 2, and you're also not going to work into the top of the last stitch from the previous row. You're just going to finish the row by working a half double crochet into the last chain space. You're also going to leave the last stitch of the previous row unworked, and then just turn your work and chain 2. Your stitch count will have decreased by 2 stitches. And now for the next decrease row, we're going to work 1 half double crochet in the first chain space, just skipping over that half double crochet from the previous row, chain 2, and then work your stitch repeat like normal. So you just skip over that first stitch, work a half double crochet in the chain space, and then work your stitch repeat across the row. You'll decrease by 1 stitch at the end of this row, and when you get to the end, make sure you switch out the colors and go back to color B to work your way back down. And now these 2 rows that we just did are what we're going to be repeating for the decreasing. So I changed back to color B and I worked a repeat of row 24 that we just previously did back down. You can see we are at our last chain space here, and we're just going to finish with a half double crochet into that chain space. There's no chain twos in between, and you're leaving the final stitch of that previous row unworked. And then that has us decrease by 2 stitches again. For the next row, it's just a row 25 repeat. So you're just repeating rows 24 and 25. This will obviously be different depending on your size. So your row repeat will be a different row if you're making a different size from me. So just make sure you have that written pattern pulled up. But we're just doing the same thing. We're going to skip over that half double crochet, and we're going to work a half double crochet in the first chain space, and then work our stitch repeat across like normal. When you get to the end, you're going to switch out your yarn again, and then we're just going to keep repeating these 2 rows for the remainder of the front panel until we get to the very last row. So I'll quickly show that to you guys and work through it quickly here. So when you get to the end of the row, change your colors and then go ahead and work your way back down like normal with the regular stitch repeat, and I'll meet you at the end. So we're at the end here. We're going to do the same thing. We're just going to finish with 1 half double crochet in the final chain space, keeping out the chain 2, and then go ahead and turn your work. And then repeat the other decrease row as well. So chain 2, skip over the stitches, and in that first chain space work a half double crochet, and then work your regular stitch repeat across. When you get to the end, go ahead and switch colors again, and then work the same thing back down to the other side. When you get to the end here, just finish with your half double crochet into the chain space, making sure you don't do that chain 2, and then leave the remaining stitch unworked, and then repeat the other decrease row 1 more time on the way back. So chain 2, skip over until you hit that chain space, work a half double crochet in that first chain space, chain 2, work your regular stitch repeat across the row. So that is it for the decrease rows. We only have 1 more row remaining, and we're just going to do a regular row 3 repeat. So you can switch out your yarn colors again. And then for the final row here of this side of the shoulder of the front panel, you're just going to repeat row 3, which is our regular stitch repeat across. So no decreasing when you get to the end. So now when I reach the end of the row here, I'm going to chain 2, yarn over, insert my hook into the last chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert my hook into the top of the last stitch of the row, yarn over, pull through all 5, and then just go ahead and fasten off. You'll want to leave a tail long enough to seam this last row to your back panel, and your stitch count also did not change on the last row here. It stayed the same as the previous. So now that we have the first side of the neckline done, we need to work the other side. You'll want to place your panel out in front of you with the finished shoulder on the right hand side, and we're just going to keep going across the row, joining in with a slip stitch at the bottom of the neckline area. So you'll want to take color B and then slip stitch into the next unworked chain space. So not into the same chain space as the first side of the neckline, but the very following one that is unworked, slip stitch in, chain 2, and then we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the stitch repeat. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert into the next chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 5. And then we're going to chain 2, and just continue repeating that across the row. So we did not start this row with a regular half double crochet. We just started it with our regular stitch repeat that we've been doing. And then you're just going to work across the row like you normally would, and your stitch count for this row will be the same as the opposite side of the other side of the neckline that you already did. So this side is going to be slightly different for the decreases just because we're working the opposite shoulder area. So make sure you're watching here before continuing on. It's just a little bit different, but go ahead and work your way down, and then you can chain 2 and work your way back doing the regular stitch repeat as well. So chain 2, turn your work, start off with a half double crochet like normal in the first chain space, and then continue with the regular stitch repeat after that, doing the chain 2 and then working in the chain spaces as normal. Okay, so I've worked my way across the row here. We're working our final stitch through the last chain space plus the top of the last stitch of the previous row. And now we're going to switch to our other color here for the last pull through. And now our color changes will be along the neckline. So you'll have your floats going up along the neckline for this portion. You can chain 2 and turn your work. Now we're going to be starting our decreases here. So we're going to work a half double crochet into the first chain space. So just yarn over, insert into the first chain space and work your half double crochet. And now we're not going to be chaining 2 here. So we have to kind of match it up with the other side and have our stitch counts be the same for these rows. So instead of chaining 2, you're going to skip the chaining 2 and just go right into your stitch repeat across. So half double crochet and then skip the chain 2 and then work your stitch repeats as normal. And then you can just go right back into working through the chain spaces and chaining 2 in between all the way to the end of the row. Your stitch count will decrease by 2. And then when you get to the end of the row, you'll just finish it as you normally would. Okay, so now I've worked my way back and we have 2 stitches remaining. You want to chain 2, and then in that last chain space, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and then in the next stitch, so the top of the next stitch, you're going to insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we're going to switch colors. So place that other color on your hook and do the final pull through with your new color, and you're leaving that very last stitch of the previous row unworked. So now we are back to working with color B, and those 2 rows that I just showed you are what we're going to be repeating throughout the remainder of this side of the neckline. So you're just going to keep repeating those last 2 rows. So now you can go ahead and chain 2 and turn your work. And then again, we're just doing one of the decrease repeat rows. So in that very first chain space, you're going to work a half double crochet. And then you are not going to chain 2 here. So skip doing the chain 2 and just yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain space. And in the next chain space as well, doing the regular stitch repeat, chain 2, and then just continue with the regular stitch repeat across. So we're only just skipping doing those first chain 2s of the row. So you can go ahead and work your way down with the regular stitch repeat, chain 2, turn your work, and work your way back with the regular stitch repeat as well, and then do your decrease on the end and change our colors here. Okay, and then when you get to the end of the row, just do the same thing as previously, working our last stitches over the chain space and in the top of the next stitch. And then you're going to switch out your yarn colors. And now we're just going to be doing a regular row 3 repeat with color A. So just chain 2 and turn your work a half double crochet in that first chain space, and then you will be chaining 2 here. So you want to do your chain 2 and then go back right into our normal stitch repeat, working in that same chain space plus the following chain space, yarning over, pulling through all 5, chaining 2 in between, and working your way across. When you get to the end, you're just going to finish like normal, and then make sure you leave a yarn tail long enough to sew the last row of this side of the shoulder of the front panel to your back panel. So just leave a tail that's a little bit longer so you can do your seaming. And your stitch count for this row does not change from the previous row either, because it was just a regular repeat row 3 across. So that completes the front panel, and now we need to move on to making the sleeve panels. So the sleeves start off the exact same way with the ribbing like any of the other panels. It's just going to be shorter ribbing row. So make sure you have the correct row count for your size. Work up your ribbing exactly the same. You can go back and rewatch if you need to. And then the only difference here for the sleeves is going to be the first row that we do of the main body. So you're going to chain 1, and in that very end of the very first row, work your single crochet. And now you're going to be working a second single crochet into that very same ribbing row. And then in the following, you're going to do the same thing. Work 2 single crochet into the end of the ribbing row. And then into the following, do the same thing again. Work 2 single crochet into the end of the ribbing row. So it's the exact same, except instead of just working 1 single crochet into the end, you're going to be working 2 into the end. Some of the sizes might end with just 1 single crochet in the last row, and some might end with 2. So just make sure you are watching the written pattern to see what you need to do for your size. Your panel here is going to look all crazy and wavy because we've increased so much, but that is normal. And now after that, we just go right back in to the normal stitch repeat, just like we've been doing on the main body of the back and the front panel. So it's going to be exactly the same. So you can just bring in your new color, chain 2, and then we're going to do the same as before. In the next stitch, you're going to work a half double crochet, and then you can go into our regular stitch repeat. Remember, it's a little bit different for row 2 here because you're working into the single crochet stitches instead of into chain spaces. So chain 2, work your stitch into the same as the previous, and then skip 2, and then work into the following, yarn over, pull through all 5 loops, chain 2, and just continue repeating across. So that is the only difference you need to know for the sleeve, is just the increases in row 1. Everything else is exactly the same. Make sure you continue to switch out your yarn color every 2 rows here, and you're just going to leave the floats along the side just like you did for the back panel and the front panel. So go ahead and work the amount of rows that is called for your size, and then I will meet you here after all of the panels are complete. You need to make 2 of these sleeve panels, and then we'll seam everything together. So now we're going to join our front and our back panel. You're going to want to place your back panel right side facing up and your front panel right side facing down so that the right sides are facing each other. So for the right side for this sweater, row 2 is considered our right side. So when you're looking at, when you're holding your work up and working row 2 across, you're looking at the right side of your work. It really doesn't matter if you want a different side to be the right side. That's totally fine because both sides look the same. Just make sure you pick the right side and the wrong side as the same row for all of your panels so that it all matches. So row 2 for me is the right side. That's row 2 of the main bodies. Place our panels together, and now we're going to join at the shoulders. So you can use any method that you prefer using for seaming. You can use your hook and slip stitch across. You can use your needle and do your favorite sewing stitch across. I like to do the mattress stitch, but your preferred method is perfectly fine. Doesn't matter how you do it. and you're just going to sew the top of the front panel shoulder to the back panel, and then repeat the same thing on the other side, and just make sure you don't bunch or skip any stitches, and just try and keep everything nice and even. There's lots of tutorials available if you need a more in-depth video on how to seam panels together. So you can just search up sewing methods or mattress stitch for crochet, and you'll get lots of good videos. So once your shoulders are seamed together, you want to take your sleeve, and now we're going to join our first sleeve to the front and back panel. So you're going to want the right sides facing each other again as you sew, and then I recommend pinning your sleeve in place with stitch markers to keep it nice and even. So you'll want to locate the middle stitch of your sleeve and line it up exactly with the seam at the shoulder that you just did, and then place your stitch marker there to hold it in place. And then you can kind of use the stripes as a guideline, and then evenly place the end of the row of the sleeve and the beginning of the row on the same stripe so that it's nice and even on both sides. So I'm just going to place a stitch marker here at the bottom of the brown stripe on either end of the front and back panel, and then use my same method to join. And then I also wanted to show you guys how to seam with the floats there. So to make it so that the floats are hidden on the inside of your sweater, you want to keep the float above your needle as you're seaming together. So you will want to use a needle here. If you were slip stitching at the shoulders, you'll want to use a needle and sew instead. So instead of placing your needle like this with the float underneath it, you want to have that float above it. And then you can place your needle in the stitch and pull through with the float on top of the needle, so that when we fold it right side out and we're wearing the sweater, the floats are hidden on the inside. So just make sure on those portions that do have the floats that you keep them above your needle as you're joining. Once you have the first sleeve panel joined, you'll want to join the second one as well, and then I'll show you where we need to seam for the remainder of the sweater. So now that we have our sleeves joined in, we just need to seam the side of the sweater as well as the remainder of the sleeve. So if you have enough yarn left over from seaming that last row of your sleeve to your sweater, you can continue going with that, and you can seam down the side, but we're going to be needing to seam from the cuff to the underarm and the underarm down to the bottom of the hem. So kind of like in an L shape. But if you still have enough yarn from joining in the sleeve, you can just keep going, and you can keep going down the side of the sweater if you want, or you can go down the sleeve with the remainder of the tail as well. If you don't have enough yarn, you can just go ahead and bring in a new piece of yarn and then work in an L shape, but we just need to get the sides and the sleeve seamed. You're going to do the same thing with the floats here. Make sure the floats are above the needle, and then just use the same method that you have been. Once you get this side complete, you need to repeat on the other side as well. So now we have our entire sweater seamed together, and we just need to add the neckline trim in here. So I'm going to take color A, and I have my sweater right side facing out now, and I'm just going to join in with a slip stitch. You can join in anywhere you want on the collar. I'm just going to join right next to the seam towards the back panel here with a slip stitch, and then I'm just going to chain one and then work a single crochet into each of the stitches around. So for the top of the back panel, I'm going to be working into the tops of the stitches and in the chains that we have made. And then when we're working down the sides and the decreased rows of the front panel, you're just going to be working around the ends of the rows and not into an actual stitch. So you can see here, I'm just going to work one single crochet into each spot all the way across the back panel. When I've worked my way to the front panel here and we're just on the decrease rows, there's not an actual stitch to work into, so you're just going to have to use your best judgment, and you can work your single crochet stitches around the chains and around the stitches of the ends of the rows. So you just want to make sure that you're not working too many single crochet stitches, or your work will get wavy at the collar, and you also don't want too little or it will pucker and pull at your collar. So just kind of evenly place them, and then when you get to the floats on the front panel, you're going to just crochet directly over them. So when you're inserting your hook, just make sure those floats are above your hook, same thing as that they were above the needle, and just work your single crochet as normal and hiding those floats with our stitches. Once you've worked your way around, you can go ahead and just slip stitch to join to the first single crochet made. Go ahead and fasten off, and then you need to weave in any remaining ends that you might have with your needle, and that is it for this design. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video tutorial.